So, scene is set for Perth. Yeah, I keep going Perth by night. I'm like, wait, no, that's not it. Uh, and Leon and Rafat are meeting at Leon's bookstore. I think we can, assume we're both already there, and we're in the back room that Leon occasionally uses for seeing mostly mortal clients. So he's like, all right. Been meaning to talk to you for a while, but, well, spent the last week and a half working through a bit of a personal revelation. Always fun when one of those hits.
Well, your insights have always given us an edge when us as just the linesman, and hopefully it will do so for the court as well. I believe it will. So, if that means a little bit of me time, who am I to deny the prince?
But first off, anyone you'd recommend for any specific positions here in the city? Or possibly any position that you would like yourself? My first inclination on going, oh, hey, I'll be prince, was actually to make you Siniskull, but then I realized...
Politically unwise.
Exactly.
Now...
the job and well, but, yeah.
If I would not be interested currently because I think it would damage the court and the clan. However, whoever you pick, if at some future date something happens, then your notion might be a bit more palatable, especially since there'll be more distance between yourself and the linesman. Some of the new arrivals don't know you. I know you. You won't give favoritism to the linesman. We perhaps know, well, myself, Valiente, know a bit better how to approach you. And I'm sure that will stand in our favor, but that's not something they couldn't learn themselves. Let's see. For people to become Siniskull, to talk to that position, the list is relatively short. Hannibal has a very different approach. It could work politically for you in some respects, as well as sometimes you want someone who has a bit more of a rougher edge.
Mm-hmm.
That can be very, very useful for, and well, the prince can deliver messages himself or through other means. Although that said, he did not impress me last night attempting to look into my mind. Now, we weren't in Elysium, but before yesterday I would have been pushing for him for political reasons. Now, as I think about it, not so much. Creel
wouldn't take it. Creel doesn't even want to be Primogen.
Then we're looking towards Bagger.
I think after a decade he might have the makings of a good court officer.
There's Halliwell, but unfortunately, although Halliwell does reasonably good work, I'm not sure he's being active enough socially to really get the kind of attention he needs. Valiente has a similar problem to myself, even though he's not the Primogen Council.
No, and then we've got a bunch of new people for the most part. Now, at the moment, Hannibal is still the best choice, but he's not like the... And the main reason for that is, for some reason, Creel wants him as Seneschal.
I would say perhaps a discreet, if it does come up, perhaps have a discreet chat with him beforehand, because if he's now, as it always is with these things, let's put it bluntly down at brass tacks, if you don't get caught, it isn't a problem. But
exactly.
He might not be refined at the ability as yourself not to get noticed. He did get noticed. Now, I don't think that's not to say he'd necessarily do Elysium. Legally, he didn't do anything wrong.
No, but it was still... It was rude.
Yes. Now, he does plenty of rude things. I don't have a problem with that. But it's something I'm a little bit more wary of. Well, not necessarily. It's just no, and I'd prefer if my name wasn't entangled up in that. But
Right.
maybe you might want to bring it up just to.
I just advise him. You know, there's always keep in mind. No matter what you do, someone out there is going to be better at it than you, and will be able to notice when you do it.
For the position of Scourge, although it's tempting, I wouldn't have Salvador holding both those titles. The question is, do you want the Scourge position known or unknown, or will you have two Scourges?
Actually, officially, we will have a known Scourge. Whether or not there's any unknown Scourges.
Yeah, and the advantage of these is that, well, it's like, oh, well, I never had a vote before the Primogen Council. Of course, I couldn't have recognized him. Whereas, let's see, I'm sure there's all sorts of angles if we work there. Of individuals that could work as a Scourge, there's potentially Creel, but I'm not so sure. No, I don't think so. Creed is, I'm sure he'd have, well, I'm not sure if he's inclined that way, although I'm sure his powers of the Bloodwing would make him reasonable. Valiente might be one of the people I've started training him in Auspex, combined with his marksman skills, plus his obfuscate, could make him quite skilled in that department.
No, Valiente would probably make a good Scourge.
Plus it might go down better with Hannibal, because it's a member of his clan.
Exactly.
Istvan also could make a good choice, but...
I don't know. The problem with both of the Brujah here in town is that they don't really want any positions.
That's the thing. He's happy to help out the sheriff on occasion because they get on. That's grand. Now, for Keeper of Elysium, I would put my name into the ring for that one. I think Hannibal could do well in that position, plus he's doing a lot of work on the Elysium, and just as the sheriff names his hounds, if I became Keeper of Elysium, I would recognize his efforts and name him as a sword. And once we have that location picked, Elder Kissinger will begin warding, but we do have to pick it soon because he will not stay in the city the whole time.
Right. Well, and actually, and in your advantage, I know Creel actually thinks you would do well as Keeper of Elysium. For someone who doesn't want political power, he wields it very well.
He's not inclined toward it, but doesn't mean he's not capable of some abilities. And the other person I had thought was Halliwell, but I don't think he can actually be quite skillful at diplomacy at points, but he is very much focused on settling his roots into gaining more control over the Kine. But I would definitely recognize him with a sword position. There are a few others, if I was going to keep releasing. There's a member of my own clan who's new arrival, you might recall Mr. Archer.
Oh, yes.
Very skilled at a particular focus and of thaumaturgy regarding technology. Extremely useful. The Nosferatu might just hone natural aptitude and pick out individuals for that things, but, well,
right.
Cheating beats natural aptitude. Plus,
9 times out of 10.
As his dossier said to me, he was picked for natural aptitude, so I'd bet my money on him over most Nosferatu.
Nice.
Extremely skilled, so I might think of that card. Now, other positions. I said the Scourge, the Keeper of Elysium. Harpies. Unfortunately, the list of people for this are pretty small. Halliwell has some inclinations towards that effect, however, he needs to start mingling more.
Yeah, honestly, my view on Harpies obviously differs in a number of ways from my predecessors. He was like, aha, we will appoint Harpies. And I was like, you don't appoint a Harpy. A harpy appoints themselves, and then everyone goes, "Oh, he's a harpy," or "She's a harpy."
So, well, taking that approach, that's perfectly fine. However, I had previously suggested it to the former prince, and I know some other people had later on after hearing me mention it, but there hadn't. But the chancellor position doesn't enforce the boons, but they record them. I have some interest there myself.
You would want, so you'd want to have that hat as well?
Potentially. It's not essential. Of course, none of it is essential. I'm happy to serve as is needed, as long as it doesn't conflict with my existing duties.
No, actually, I think it's useful to have someone who records who owes who what boons.
But it is up to the harpies to enforce such things. All the chancellor does is keep track.
Yep.
So it doesn't necessarily have too much power, but as I said to Hannibal when we first arrived in the city, it is handy to have your hands on that book. I don't necessarily have the necessary level for a harpy, although I think I could give a stab at it. It's more the disposition. But Chancellor, I can do.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Scourge is the one I think. I honestly think Valiente, one, would do the job well, and two, would be acceptable to everyone.
Mm.
So there's Scourge. Oh yes, and that other thing. So back when Lavoisier was still prince, apparently he made a promise to Creed that if more Gangles show up, he could have the Primogen position.
A prince can certainly make a position, and I do remember Creed saying this, though I don't recall Lavoisier saying it himself. But a prince can make the position. It is up to the clan now, given that the rest of the clan present in the city are a neonation of fledgling. It's currently more of a formality, if such a seat was to be made.
Well, I'm inclined towards making it. I mean, right now we've actually got more Gangrel in the city than, say, Ventru or Bruja. But
Talk first, as you are, obviously, with the other members of the Primogen Council, if you can do it before the Primogen Council meeting, and if no one disagrees with opening the seat, get them to have an official meeting. However, if you start coming across resistance, perhaps you might be able to placate them with merely an observer seat. It does let the gangrel be put into a position where they have someone saying things. And I had said to previously some of them that the grasshoppers are doing quite well. I'd said if anything raised because I wasn't sure exactly of the situation with Creed. Now, if he can convince them and the Primogen Council can be convinced to... Well, the Prince can make a Primogen seat. The clan can nominate someone. The question is, will the rest of the Primogen Council be willing to accept? Not necessarily in a legal sense, but in a... will they just ignore him and speak over them? I don't have an issue. He's reasonable enough. He was asking about when the next Primogen Council meeting was, but I'm a little... Well, I wasn't sure, so I didn't press the matter. I know he had said certain things, but he's got to get his ducks in a row first.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely... I'm probably going to be talking with him in about an hour or so.
Mm.
Let's see here. So, let's see. I'll need to...
And to be clear, I am generally in favour, seeing as we have a loyal Camarilla Gangrel following the city, I'm generally in favour with them having some kind of representation, hopefully a full Primogen. Failing that, a observer seat, it might go away. And once someone is in an observer seat, it's easier as time goes by to possibly turn that into a full seat.
Well, I'll throw that one at the throw it at the wall and see if it sticks, or if it hasn't cooked long enough yet.
Although, as we talk about things, obviously the harpy is not being declared. If we have the Seneschal's position, Scourge, this Sheriff is something done. It depends. The Chancellor position has some power. Obviously, the Harpies, Prince and Seneschal are quite... It is quite acceptable for them to request to see the list, be shown it in reasonable time. Others might not be as keen on that. Me holding 2 titles, however, the Chancellor is... It's useful, not particularly used. As I said, I'm not as well disposed towards Harpy. Harpy, as you said, will take time to have someone come to the fore and show off their abilities. However, we still need someone aside from the Archon and the Prince, of course, to record such things.
Yeah. Well, and to be perfectly honest, well, that would be 2 hats. Neither of them are especially powerful hats.
Well, the Sheriff, the Seneschal, those are...
Oh, no, I was talking about the Keeper of Elysium and Chancellor. But yeah, no, Sheriff and Seneschal are fairly powerful, but...
To be clear, when we had the vote, it was my saying I would not have voted in favour. It is edicts that must be voted on. So big, broad, sweeping things, not the domain, not the other things you said. And plus, there's nothing the Prince can make whatever positions. However, they must be filled in, obviously, in a time-honoured sense when it comes to such the clans and such. So Primogens are a bit of an odd one. Yeah. Or the Primogen Council for other things. Now, technically, somebody could try and say, well, you can't go off and say this seat for this clan, because the Primogen is a bit of an oddball. But if somebody tries to force the issue, I might make the point to them, so would they be happy with if one of them was to have to leave the city or something foul befell them, would they be happy with the rest of the Primogen Council picking their clan's Primogen?
Yeah.
Or unless they decide to intentionally deadlock it so their clan has a seat, but no one on it. So Primogen are an unusual case.
Yeah.
You can't force the issue for it to be... No one should force the issue for it to be the Primogen Council picks.
Yes.
But aside from that, there's no other positions that necessarily need immediate filling. Once the court grows a little, perhaps, given the events with some of the others, a full warden wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea.
Right. Well, I figure we'll probably we'll see how yeah, a warden would actually be quite useful to have. But I think for now I'm just, before the Primogen meeting, I'm just going to focus on these are the ones that absolutely must be filled, and then these are ones that we need, but we can actually possibly spend some more time discussing. I mean, who knows? We may eventually end up having to find someone to make a console. Although Yeah, I would say at the moment we need a warden more than a consul.
Consul will, well, they won't be staying in the city. We may end up with a consul with us, but
Yeah.
it might end up that the Primogen Council, seeing as there's going to be a lot of different things, might end up at some point in the future wanting a steward.
Right. Now, wait, out of character. What's the steward? I don't remember that one.
A steward isn't necessarily a corpus. A steward is someone who works for the Primogen Council. They're basically like the secretary for the Primogen Council, as in they transcribe the minutes and things like that. They're not necessarily on the Primogen Council. And this is for the Primogen Council. Like, if the Primogen Council is meeting with the prince, they have nothing to do with the prince.
Yeah,
They don't
exactly.
necessarily have that much help. The thing is, they get to sit in and listen. So that can actually be very useful for them. Sometimes they're a member of the Primogen Council, sometimes not.
Well, we'll see. That will, of course, be up to the Primogen Council. But we'll see what happens. Okay. I think I've at least got my general ideas. No. That's something for the long future, and that can wait till it actually comes up to discuss it with you. Yeah, now we need to figure out who we're going to be pulling together to deal with these Nagaraja.
What I would suggest, you could, depending on how much distance you want from the situation, or if you could, if it is put forward, I think it was a reasonable suggestion to have the sheriff be one of the people, be given training when this is completed. You could have it that only those who will be considered are those who actively help in this, whether that be in the fighting or in a relatively significant manner on the logistical side, which will be decided upon by yourself, let's say. Obviously, if they're involved in the fighting, that's pretty clear cut. On the logistical side, if I hand somebody a post-it note, that's not necessarily going to quite come in. There has to be a significant way. If you do it like that, that narrows down the list of candidates, and you could have the sheriff taking point on dealing with this issue.
Yeah. So there's that, and there's that.
There's definitely something we don't know about it, but
well, there's
as I said, we're dealing with an elder.
Yeah, we're dealing with an elder, and we're dealing with, as far as I can tell, another bloodline off of the Giovanni or whatever they used to be called, or something else. So, always fun. So we'll have to deal with the Nagaraja, because at the very least they've shown up and haven't had the decency to say, "Oh, hi, we're in your domain."
Yes. If capture them alive could be useful for questioning them. A little side project I'm doing is I'm not sure if you're familiar with the a ritual. One of the names for it is Blood Walk. Tremere have.
I have heard of this ritual.
Now, in no way should I ever the court this be used on. However, enemies that come, as you know, I've gone out on a couple of the excursions, and I'm going to be bloodwalking some of those samples soon. And, well, I'll be collecting my own little database of our enemies, and if I can get back far enough, it might help identifying people later on. Obviously, this is not going to be used on members of the court, that kind of a thing.
Of course not.
But still very useful piecing things together later on.
Oh yes, no, I can view many situations in which that would be useful.
Now, of course, if people want to start handing me over bottles of blood and want me to make a record, that's fine too, but I'm not foolish enough to try and force the issue.
Well, some... Well, and for instance, if we find, say, some fledgling that was left out to deal with it on their own, they don't happen to be a gangrel, that would be very useful.
Yes, could be quite useful. Well, it only goes back so far, but as I build it up as the years go by, it could become more and more useful.
Well, that's more along the lines of, what asshole sired and left their child to run. And, well, I fully understand that gangrel do this occasionally, and that seems more... And they largely view it as a sort of rite of passage. If you can't survive your first year on your own, you don't really deserve to keep surviving. But yeah, it's not something that, in general, you like to see from anyone else.
One thing to be considered is when the city does grow, not every city has just one Keeper of Elysium. If we have more Keepers Elysiums later on, and one thing I could point out, if I did become the Keeper of Elysium, is to Halliwell, is if he does well a sword, and we decide to open up another Elysium later, well, a second Keeper of Elysium to focus on that area wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
Yes, no, that does sound like a good idea. So, yeah. Well, thank you, Rafat. This has been pretty helpful.
Sure you'll get a bunch more suggestions?
Oh, I'm sure I will. I plan on talking to all of the rest of the Primogen individually. Or Primogen and would-be Primogen. Considering that Creed planned on tying his wagon to me before he became Prince.
Well, things didn't come to a head in that way, as we can recognize Lavoisier was very skilled in the war. There were some issues as a prince. The issue, thankfully, did not have to be forced.
I think if he'd made one or two slightly different choices, or even just picked a useful senescal, he might not have come to that.
Well,
which is part of why...
I gave him advice, and a prince is free to listen or ignore as they will. As you are now, Prince Harris.
Yes, but, well, some of us know that willows survive more storms than oaks.
True enough, but he is an elder with many more years than us under his belt. There's a difference between the status of Ancilla. We do not have I don't have the age of an Ancilla.
Well, let's see here. Actually, no matter how you count it, unless I were to suddenly find myself in Europe, I would, at the very least, be considered old enough for an Ancilla. But, sort of on the cusp. Well, anyways, I'll see you around, Rafat.
I shall see you.
And
Rafat will head out.
end scene.